As you know, our economy is doing some interesting things right about now. And the goal of this meeting is to leave you with some informed information for you to go out and share with your clients, with investors, with whoever it makes sense to. I also want to reiterate that the bathrooms, you go out the double doors here, you take a right, and then you take a left at the table that has a giant floral display. So that ought to be easy. All right, and first of all, I want to thank our vendor partners. They'll get a chance to come up and say a couple of words towards the end, but I do want to give a big shout out to Bailey & Wood, to Home Team Inspections, and to America's Preferred Home Warranty. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so bear with me. I want to start our event off with a short poem. And the poem is titled, Let's Not Go Crazy. We are gathered here today to talk about this thing called real estate. Electric or real estate, because some people think we're getting ready to go back into a recession like '08. But I'm here to tell you, there's something else. Today's market update. So, no Nantuckets here. So, with that, I want to take a little bit of time to introduce our fabulous panelists. I think it's going to give us a lot of perspective on what's going on, because we're going to get 3 different viewpoints, which is what's going to make a difference in terms of how you leave with the information that you gather. So, let's start with Steve Lains. If you give a quick wave, Steve. Steve has been the Chief Executive Officer of BAGI, which is the Builders Association of Greater Indianapolis, for the last 25 years. Now that's a tenure.
I was 5.
You probably lost a few years of your life too with that. But he has really tried to build a partnership between the founder of the Realtor Group and with the Builders Association. So we applaud you on that, and we're looking forward to more partnerships in the future. Justin, can you please raise your hand? All right. Most of us from Keller Williams do know Justin. He is one of our own. However, Justin has held many positions within Keller Williams, such as buyer's agent. He has been a team leader for Keller Williams, and now is the owner of the Group 725. Not only that, he's also our district rep for Area 1. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that right.
Close enough.
Thank you. He knows some things. And then we have fabulous Brad Coffing, who is here. He is an analyst with my board and does a lot of research projects that help us to understand how we can be a better value to the Realtor Founder or the Realtor Group as a whole, and then just understanding the ways of the world and how economics is playing a role. So with that,
understanding the ways of the world.
That's a good range.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to pass the microphone to you first, Brad. With that, can everybody hear me? Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
All right, great, great, great. So we're actually off to the races, my friends. We're going to start with a video, if you wouldn't mind, Chris.
Sure. Give me just a moment. I will pull that up.
Buyers.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is that we're always facing,
Right.
is this supply-demand thing. Now, in 2008, what happened was there was a tremendous oversupply because the foreclosures went everywhere. And the market just froze. Nobody was buying houses. Had nothing to do with the economy, really. Had nothing to do with interest rates. It had to do with there was a real estate panic. And people quit buying, and there's this huge supply. We dumped a bazillion properties on the market, and all the buyers are standing on the sidelines looking at it. So almost no demand, huge supply. So you see one time in the last 100 years that real estate prices actually went down. And that was 2008. But that was huge supply, almost no demand. Now, what do we got right now? Shortage of houses. And the buyers are calming down because interest rates are going up, and supply is catching up slowly. Because some of the new housing stuff starting to come back on. Labor shortage is starting to a little bit be alleviated. Some of the Biden bucks are running out. People are actually having to go back to work. The lumber prices have stabilized, so new housing is coming on the market again.
Yes.
At a better rate than it was, say, a year and a half ago. So we got a little bit of supply up and a little bit of demand down, And so we've got a softening in the rate of increase of price, but you're not going to see prices go down. Because you're not going to see the demand versus the supply shift enough to cause prices to go down.
Which is different than a lot of the stuff that we're hearing when you're turning on your TV. So that's why we have these fabulous guys here. So I want to start off, question number one. What is the one thing you wish people knew about our current or future economy? Brad.
Yeah. So, I would say that we're largely in a position that we've never really been in before. I mean, can you think of the last time we had so many largely exogenous things going on at the same time? I mean, when was the last time that we came out of a global pandemic and then went into a war in Europe and then had supply chain bottlenecks all over the world and had large, vast, portions of the world shut down? So there's going to be really, I think we're trying to figure our way out of this mess, right? And I think there's old models that serve certain purposes moving forward, but also I think there's new kind of paradigms that we're looking through. I think I tend to agree with Dave for the most part that the fundamentals are significantly different than a wave, right? Whenever we talk about a recession, people tend to just kind of reflexively go back to the last round that happened. So 2020, when we basically shut down the world for 3 months or whatever. And then before that, 2008. But that doesn't mean that, are we probably going to have some kind of an economic downturn in the next 18 to 24 months? I think most of the markets are pricing that in, right? I mean, that seems like a probability. Is it going to be closer to garden variety, like we have 399 largely to an extent? Probably closer to that. But again, the fundamentals of the market are just so much different now than they were before. So I would take things as they're coming, take it with a grain of salt, take it day to day, but there's going to be some corrections in the marketplace, but there's still a lot more demand than there is supply. So.
What he said. No, I think for the current economy, I would say nothing is certain, right? Like think back to 2.5 years ago, the economy's chugging along, wages are up, unemployment's down, stock market record growth. Things were going really well, people making more money than ever before, and then we have a shutdown. So nothing is certain. What's interesting to me is that I think as we look at where we're at today, consumer confidence levels, like if I were to ask you guys, would you rather go back to right at the pandemic and the shutdown or today? Consumer confidence index actually shows that people would actually rather be back in the beginning of the pandemic. Consumer confidence is lower today than it was 24 months ago, which is eye-opening. For future economies, I was listening to a podcast recently and they talked about this. The question was posed, if I give you a coin, how many sides would you say there are to the coin? And the respondent said 2. I'm like, yeah, 2. I would say 2. And answer it in the car. And the guy said, actually, there's the ridge. Like, your job is to not be right or left. Your job is to stand on the ridge, look at economic policy and government regulations that are happening. As a business owner, this is what they were talking about, the things they were talking about through. As a business owner, and for me as a real estate investor, and for us as real estate professionals, look at policies that are being implemented and be in a position that you're fluid enough that you can react and pivot in real time. Because, as Brad mentioned, economic downturn, we're likely to see one, I would say. I agree with Brad. Wealth that is generated during those downturns is very rarely, if ever, given back, so put yourself in a position to be able to capitalize on those markets.
Thanks. So how do you follow those? They didn't even use notes or anything. I would keep it simple. Right? I'm a builder group, and we're not the most sophisticated or advanced group, right? So research analyst scares me. I don't know what that is. I got permit data that we get from calling up the permit offices because we can't trust what we get online, right? So what I would tell you is the part that has me thinking about and wanting people to recognize is cutting through all the noise, right? All the stuff that we're all worrying about. The fundamentals that have happened in the marketplace is we have priced a whole large segment of the population out of the ability to think about owning a new home. I don't care if it's a new home, or, and I told Brett I'd say this, one of those old stinky homes you guys sell. Why don't you sell new houses? Come see me, I'll tell you how to do that. No. But from my perspective, what is being missed is, I just saw a national statistic, 60% now of the population can no longer afford to buy a home with price increases. In this marketplace, closest that I can find is we've had a 30% increase in the cost of a new home pre-pandemic to today. We were already fighting affordability pre-pandemic. I mean, we would get these national statements of how we're the most affordable metro market in the country. Well, sure, you put us against Chicago and San Francisco and New York, that's really cool, but affordability is local, right? And we are proud to be the logistics center of the country in all these warehouses. And we get excited when our mayors give and our governor gives millions of dollars in economic incentives to have these facilities, and then we fill them with $15 to $20 jobs. And then our plan commissions don't allow a home to be built that's less than $350,000 because of our property tax caps. So we were already fighting that issue. It's only compounded significantly worse now. We still don't know all the numbers. That national statistic is the one I'm using right now. We're trying to figure out what it means locally here. But for me, I agree with the little video clip. Prices aren't going backwards. The price of a refrigerator, the price of a floor, a garage door, a roof, whatever it may be, we had a group of suppliers, national manufacturing suppliers, who lost the bottom of their market in 2008, and they could not even consider price increases. And we had an anemic enough growth up until pre-pandemic that they couldn't get price increases. So there was probably a decade where we had this really great low cost of products and services in the home. That turned on a dime as soon as the pandemic hit, and we're not going backwards. Yeah, we're talking about leveling of lumber prices, but leveling of lumber prices, again, just to give you some kind of sense, we're talking about leveling at 70% more than they were pre-pandemic. And again, I don't hear anybody talking about increasing lumber production. Nobody's increasing refrigerator production. I think it's here to stay. We've cut a whole segment of people out of home ownership.
All right, I think that's awesome. When you're talking about home affordability and we're talking about buyer confidence and all of that, how do you guys feel, and we'll start with you, Steve, how do you feel the media is impacting our buyers' confidence? And then should they buy now or wait?
I thought about how to answer this question.
That's a little targeted question.
So I'll start this off with, how many of you trust the media anymore anyway? How many of you shut it off, right? So at some level, that has all become such white noise, and whether you're left, right, middle, it seems to be hard to get information and data anymore. So that's why I'm glad that we can have a panel like this, and you can give a different perspective than.
And actually, how about I edit that question and say, basically the bathroom chatter. So neighbors talking to neighbors and people creating their own story about what the economy is going to do. How about that?
Yeah, and so thank you. And she was afraid I was getting too political, and I wasn't.
No.
A good catch. That was a perfect facilitator skill set right there. She got nervous. Her palms were sweaty, and I was going to get political. I was going to say, any president's name or anything else. I promise. But what Brad said, from a standpoint of, we got all this white noise. We have this conversation going on about all this stuff that's out of our control. I think what we've got to control as industry members is, in my opinion, that affordability. that options of home choices that we do not have and cannot get approved in this marketplace. If we really truly want to address affordability and address the issues that give us the chance to keep selling to the largest segment of the market, which is that under $300,000 buyer, we've got to fight for ourselves in the conversations happening around, you know, the lunch tables or the coffee, coffee pot at the offices around, it is a bad word to say density. It isn't a bad word to talk about townhomes. It's not a bad word to talk about something less than, God forbid, a third of an acre lot in McCordsville, right? I mean, we've got to have that conversation. So that, you say now you're comfortable, I'm going to go now.
We'll see.
Now I can talk politics. No, it is, I think Steve is absolutely right. Like we talk about density, and there was a market study that was done, I think it was 2019 or 18. They surveyed the population, and the common theme was the need for, the desire for walkability to restaurants, to grocery, bars, mixed-use development, right? But my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, is that basically the local municipalities are saying, awesome over there, right? Is that accurate? Yeah. Okay. So, yes, to that. Affordability in perspective. I was with Brad out in DC last month, and Lawrence Yoon, who's the chief economist for NAR, talked about the affordability crisis that we're facing. The same home today versus 12 months ago, 55% more monthly payment. Average monthly payment 12 months ago was $1,600 and some change, $2,600 and some change now. So affordability is a real issue. I think for us as the professionals in the marketplace today, how to control the narrative and the conversation, because the media is a lot of fake news, is we need to be the economists of choice. We need to be able to have the conversation with factual data. We're talking to the people in our database, and we were talking, the three of us beforehand. One of the ways I think the media can spin something, like if we just look at inventory for issues, just like one little piece. We just got the latest numbers from my board. I think we saw an 8.5% increase month over month in active inventory. Media can say, oh my gosh, inventory's on the rise, inventory's on the rise. I think it's important for us to step back and look pre-pandemic numbers, right? So when we tell the consumer, yeah, inventory trended up month over month, but if we look back to May of 2019, there were 5,800 homes for sale. We're at 2,400. Like Beth did the math for me yesterday. It's like 130% decrease in active listings from pre-pandemic levels. Like, so to Dave's point, yeah, supply is going to be an issue for the foreseeable future. So again, for us, we just have to be the economist of choice, be able to speak to the economy with actual information to people in our databases that are dealing with all this crap in the media.
I actually had this thought yesterday and today when I was looking at stuff, because I usually just glance through all the news. I hit all of them, just because you get a spectrum and then you kind of shake out your head kind of where you think the story is, right? And, you know, they're gadflies. They're going to jump to whatever the story is and they cling on to it and they amp it up. And there is a, you know, when things are good, they're cheerleading. When things are bad, they turn into Dr. Phil and they tell you how you feel about it, why you feel this way, what's so terrible about it. But there is this kind of constant drumming, white noise in the background that does affect me, right? I mean, we can all pretend like it doesn't, but it does have an effect. But what I genuinely, and this isn't pandering, because if it's true, then it's not pandering, right? But I genuinely tell people, like my friends and people that I have interactions with, like, work with a realtor that knows the market that you're looking at. And as you were saying, be your own, you know, you guys serve as the economist, you guys serve as the fiduciary, the advisor to your clients, because markets are local and they're specific to each individual buyer, each individual different stories, right? So one market may truly be really out of the realm of possibility right now for some people, but for other people, it may still work out to be a great, you know, it still may be the right time for them. But left to their own devices, it's a really hard thing to shake through your head. It's a really emotional process, and what you all bring to the table would be the value that you really do is you curate them through the process, and you look at the numbers and you kind of help them take the edge off of the emotional side of it and look at it strictly dollars and cents of what makes sense for them, right? Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. And just you cited something else.
Yeah,
Justin.
one more thing. As Brad was talking, again, I think Michelle was talking about kind of the water cooler talk, or just conversations. And to Steve's point of that first-time buyer that's maybe under 300,000, we need to change the narrative, right? Because the concern for me as a professional, I'm not near as long as Steve at this. I'm 16 years. The concern for me is for the first-time buyers that are not getting into the market today, their time time frame of opportunity, maybe past it, right? If we know that real estate is one of the greatest generators of wealth, we need to be encouraging people to jump into the game today versus all this noise of, I sat down with the first time home buyer last summer, and they brought their dad, and I should have just gotten him left. And the dad was like, well, I think he needs to wait for the market to crash. I'm like, well, then we can just do this conversation because it's not happening.
Yeah.
And I go back to that as we're talking, I'm like, gosh dang, this guy wanted to spend $250,000 last year. I don't know what to do for him now. I really don't. He had a certain area that he could be, and I don't have the answer. So we just need to be changing the conversation to not necessarily sell your soul, but do what you have to get into the game. And don't feel like you're entitled to something that, $400,000 house with a finished basement and everything else. Just get into the game and then worry about the next property down the road.
100%. I think, Brad, you called it out. One of the unique things that we have as realtors is we have our own brains. We can think, we can find creative solutions to things. And that's what you need to leverage, but you also have to have the insight to know how to leverage. I guess maybe not these three, I'm kidding. But you have to leverage what you know, and you have to always be in a situation of learning. Because, events like this, or just listening to the different news circuits, and to Brad's point, maybe get them all, so that you can read all the different perspectives. I listen to all sorts of things because you never know when you're going to get that nugget of information that will provide a difference for your client or for, someone that you're just having a conversation with. Also, let's talk about, the homeownership piece. For those of us that own homes, we have more equity in our homes than any other point in history. So it's making Americans kind of feel like, hey, we can go on these trips, we can do all these things because we have equity in our houses. But also to their point, the people that don't have it, it's going to be harder and harder and harder for them to get it. So, Chris, can you play video number 2?
Yep.
A little foreshadowing. You might want to brace yourself.
Breathe through it, it's okay. Rich people get richer during inflationary periods because the assets that you own go up in value. You wake up every day and they're worth more. Your houses are worth more. Your cars are worth more. Your boats are worth more. Your country club memberships are worth more. Yeah, it's great. You're worth more money. Everybody else who isn't rich, though, they wake up every day, they don't have those assets, they're not getting any richer, everything that they need to buy every single day costs more. And so they just start losing. Their rent goes up, the cost of getting gas goes up, the cost of Snickers bars goes up. And before you know it, this K-shape that we're living in gets extended and it gets crazy, and there's fewer haves and more have-nots. And that's what, on both sides of the aisle in Washington, they agree on. Republicans and Democrats agree that that's not good. That might be the only thing they agree on. And so they look up and they only have a few tools. Number one, they have interest rates, which you're literally watching going up. And just yesterday, they said we're going to continue to raise them no matter how high we need to get people to do what? Stop spending money. Number one, stop buying houses. Number two, stop buying cars. Number three, stop taking out lines of credit to run your businesses. That's what they ultimately want to stop. And you are looking up and you're like, whoa, I don't sell cars yet. But that housing thing seems interesting. Yeah, I get it. That's us. And so they raise these rates until they start seeing changes in consumer behavior. The other tools that they have is legislation to make laws. That just takes longer. And when they can't agree on laws, they do presidential edict, which is so-and-so signed something into place that will be thrown out when the new guy's here. And they've started to write those. And then finally, they have their balance sheet, which now holds roughly close to $9 trillion on it, which means that they literally are offloading $100 million a day in mortgage-backed securities back into the open market. So what's the net of this? None of this is very complicated. Here's how you can tell what's going to happen next. You can wake up and ask yourself, self, I'm a reasonable person. That's, by the way, many people say that. But self, I'm a reasonable person. Has the change in interest rates affected the way that I choose to spend my money? If the answer is no, then they're going higher. Because y'all rich people haven't figured it out. If the answer is yes, I'm making changes, then you're getting close. And you can start looking around. So let's play the game. Don't raise your hand because it gets awkward for you, not me, but are any of you booking travel in the last 10 days? You went on a travel site and looked to book. If the answer is yes, let me guess, you said, oh my God, this is so expensive.
But
And
you did
then
it
booked it
anyway.
anyway.
Yeah.
Because you're rich. So it didn't matter that it went up. You're still, the behavior is the same. All you said was, that's inconvenient. Click. Wait, let me show you. So, anyone in here got a car lately? If anyone has gotten a car lately in the last 6 months, that's you. You went and you looked and you said, this is outrageous. I can't, are you kidding me? I'll take it in blue. And yes, you advantage to it. Probably not changing them anytime soon. And now let's talk about your businesses. Have any of you in the last 6 months either spent more money or continued to spend the same amount of money running it? Or have you went, you know what, this is, oh my gosh, we got to stop spending this much money. Projects made through expense management, and this is getting out of hand here. What do we have all these apps for? I bet you didn't do that. I bet you're just keeping it moving. So, here's what I believe. I believe that no one's made any changes yet. I believe that none of the things that they've done so far have changed a single thing about almost anyone's behavior. And because of that, I believe that everything is going to go worse. Higher rates, more laws, more sales, and ultimately what will happen here is this whole thing will slow down. The problem with it is what they do today doesn't show up tomorrow. They'll keep doing until they notice that it's working, but here's the thing. That's not the day that they can say, okay, it's enough, turn it off, embargo on, and they turn the wheel back. Can't do that. These things take 9 months, 16 months to happen and play out and make changes. It's like turning a cruise ship. They're going to overshoot it. That's what the guess is. And that's where we're at.
All right, so I'm just curious, you know, from anybody out in the audience, do you have any perception over what you just heard? Anybody have a take on that? Or do you feel that everything?
Just the fact that, you know, I don't know, for gas is, it's really odd, but that didn't stop me from driving out here.
The fact you drove here shows that.
Yeah. It's really hard.
Did you have a layover between?
And I even picked up my friend on the way out.
She owes you $20.
Exactly. But that's kind of where we're at right now. And, you know, there's all kind of discussions about rates and where we think they'll land. Nobody knows because you got to have a crystal ball for that. But if you just look at what we've experienced in the past 6 months, there's been some significant change. There's been people that were pre-approved earlier and now can't buy those houses. So, I'd like to start, let's start with Justin on this question. Is it still a good time to invest in rentals, i.e., you know, VRBOs, Airbnbs, or for that matter, just rental properties in general?
Wow.
His wife is waiting on that answer.
Do you want Justin to answer that or Whitney?
We were actually having this conversation off to the side beforehand about risk tolerance, and mine is relatively low. And just to the point about like spending and if you backed off, like I get notifications on the Starbucks app. Somebody is not backed off on that. So apparently everything is trending up. To get to that point, I just showed Brad the Fed came out with their announcement. I think it ends at 2 o'clock. They just announced another 75-point basis jump.
Yeah.
So we've already seen that play out in rates. Anyway, is it a good time? Yes, it's always a good time to buy, right? Like if you're in it for the long haul, if the numbers make sense, if you don't fall prey to emotional buying, it is always a good time to buy. To Jason's point on that video, like I love that video, and I love Jason. That guy's just phenomenal. The greatest amount of wealth is generated through real estate, and as Gary says, there's never a bad time to own real estate. I think the way he phrases it is, you can't time the market, you gotta have time in the market. So for somebody to say, I'm gonna sit on the sidelines, it's gonna get better tomorrow, like got history or that's got data to support my purchase there. Whitney does a tremendous job of this, and that's why we bought in Gatlinburg. You know, Beth bought in Gatlinburg, there's a few others. So making sure that you're in an area that can generate that income from a cash flow perspective, or you set enough aside for your capital expenditures, your general maintenance, your house cleaners, all the other stuff that you have through property taxes, that you need to so that you are in a good position. And so I can say for us, like Whitney is still hell-bent on buying. I would love to, but again, my threshold is just significantly lower. So I don't know if that answers that.
No, that does, that does.
Yes, you can buy.
All right, Brett?
I think you might be the only one up here qualified to answer that one. I don't, yeah, that's not really my area of expertise. To just kind of piggyback off of what he said, Justin brought up a great point at the beginning. So the survey of consumer confidence was at like an all-time low, but if you look at the first quarter GDP, consumer spending was up. So you may not like it, but you're still spending, right? So when that changes, though, as Jason, is that his name? Yeah. So through rate hikes, the Fed is trying to cool consumer spending. There's more demand than there is supply, right? For services, for goods, for goods. There is a lag between when the rates have an effect of cooling spending and when that then has an effect on actually allowing prices to reallocate, right? And in that period of time, I think is where we are probably going to experience the diciest portion of what's to come next. So, and you know, as you said before, we don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I'd probably be on a beach in Maui. But you know, so that's what I really would say to point people back to experts like Justin, like you all, who can actually pencil out what the cash flow looks like, what your risk tolerance is, what the market looks like, and again, like what's your duration of that risk, right? So, but for me personally, I would turn to Justin to say, hey, help me figure out kind of how this looks and what the risk of the cash flow is.
I wouldn't even turn to myself.
Or to me.
I guess what I would tell you is I'm going to just address the rental side. If you're thinking of buying a rental property, don't know the Airbnb, VRBO world that well. I have a house out in Colorado near some resort towns. All I can tell you is those communities where there is a large number of Airbnb and VRBO, all those communities are restricting the number of licenses they're given because that's getting out of control and causing lots of social and affordability issues that I don't know where that ends up in a market like Indianapolis. But in the rental world, I am going to tell you that I think renting is becoming an option of choice for our populations. And the two key population segments I believe that that's going to be continue to grow on is, or grow in, is that first-time home buyer. You know, that first-time home buyer moving into being married and having a family. And maybe they have gotten so used to renting that it's convenient. And maybe they've got an experience of watching their parents in 2008 lose money in a house or get kicked out of their house, whatever might happen. Like, I don't want any part of that. And it's really nice. I can just call and get my light bulb changed and fix the furnace and figure all that out. And, oh, by the way, if I don't like it, I can not sign the lease and move to a new place that's newer and better. And I don't have to deal with any of the selling and buying and all that stuff. And then you and that is one of the largest demographic segments of the marketplace right now, coupled with the other largest demographic segment, which is me, an empty nester. And I am now sitting in a home that I raised 3 boys in, and I can't get out because if I sell it, I'm going to go move and I want to buy something. I'm going to spend the same or more for less house. So I'm in that house. And if I didn't have the option that I described with my retirement home in Colorado, maybe renting is an option. Because maybe I could then rent a house, somebody else is upkeeping it, and I could go travel to Colorado if I didn't want to live there. And so I think there is a growing trend in rental that you're starting to see, talking about noise in the news, you're starting to see some conversations going on that you're selling homes to investors, and that's ruined neighborhoods. we're building homes to investors, and that's ruining neighborhoods. Because I believe Wall Street, where the money is. What did Walmart just buy the Denver Broncos for $42 billion?
Yes.
Anyway, the Walmart Broncos. Wall Street is responding. I read an article where there is, upwards of 200 billion with a B capital sitting in Wall Street, waiting to invest in rental properties. I think that speaks volumes to what that world looks like, right? I will tell you, in our marketplace, as a builder group, most of the builders I speak to who are building those large subdivisions, and I have an advantage in my world of knowing what's going on in the market by just really talking to 10 people. So we have the marketplace on the new construction side where 10 builders do 80% of the building permits. So I can get a handle on 80% of the market with 10 phone calls, right? I will tell you, have some of them sold in a, we'll call it a family, ownership subdivision to investors? Yes, but not by knowledge or in any great numbers. We were talking, I know a builder who had a problem that was created after the fact with somebody posing as a owner, really as a front to an investor buying a house in there, and now it's a rental house, and it caused a bunch of turmoil. But I don't think we have a wholesale problem of builders selling to investors in those neighborhoods. But because the market is there, I know of 4 subdivisions in this marketplace that are under construction that are build to rent. Have you heard of that? Build to rent. And it's just basically thinking of those demographics I just described who I don't want to be in an apartment complex, but I've got a family now, or I'm used to a big house, I'm an empty nester, and I don't want to move into an apartment, but I don't want to buy, but I want a house. And these are subdivisions, 50, 100, 150 homes, that think about it as an apartment complex, but you just don't have common walls. All your maintenance, I can call somebody up and get the furnace fixed, and I don't have to pay for it. I have all my defense, and I have all the things that I need for a family or for my interests, and those are happening, where you do have subdivisions that are being built to rent.
I think Steve said something that's really important. I think that's key. I don't know if
Can I write this down?
Yeah. I don't know if you picked up on it. He said he was talking about Wall Street, right? If we follow the money, and if it's a good time to invest in real estate or not, what is Wall Street doing, right? They're investing in real estate. We think it's a good time to invest in real estate. If these hedge funds are shifting their assets over to real estate, probably a good time to invest in real estate. And then one more thing, because he brought up the investors. Imagine a world, because this is their stated goal, right? The hedge fund investors, 70% non-owner occupied property, 30% owner occupied property. If we know that wealth is generated through real estate, what side of the equation do you want to be on? Go buy real estate.
Love it. Yes. Well, 100%. And I was listening to someone speak. And honestly, if it was someone in this room, I apologize for not giving you credit. But they talked about the whole thing that happened in 2008. And think about it. Those are the children that experienced that, or they're getting ready to purchase properties now. And so they remember having to move away from their friends. They remember the desperate attempts to try to hold on to that house. So there's some trauma actually there. So you, as the agent, might have to dig a little bit deeper to figure out, why they're not interested in buying. I'm actually on a committee with my board, and our whole goal is to try to infuse the power of home buying into our young people. Targeting them with high school things, different initiatives, stuff that makes home buying sexy again, because that's how you're going to be able to move out of mom and dad's house, is if you start to invest in your home.
That's a t-shirt there, I think.
We can make that happen. Who has a cricket? We can make it happen. So, but I'm saying all of that to say, that's where our power lies, is to know this and to then be able to talk to it, or to uncover it, or have them self-discover it, whatever. That's kind of our unique proposition that we have as real estate agents.
Can I add
Yes.
another tidbit for you to think about? If you're questioning whether I need to, can you hear me? if you're questioning whether it's a strong market or not, and this is the context that helps me feel like the world's not falling in our market when you hear all the white noise. So, pre-pandemic, new construction, we did 6,000 permits a year. So we went from, again, and this helped keep it in perspective, when the market crashed, we were doing 16,000 permits a year. The market crashed to 3,000 permits a year. I talked about that anemic growth out of the downturn. So it took us 10 years to go from 3,000 permits to pre-pandemic, a month before the pandemic, we were doing 6,000 permits a year. We all then went, oh crap, you're only supposed to live through one recession. We're going to do it twice. It didn't happen, right? So we're up 10,000 permits, a 40% increase in the market. And what I like to say is, if you pick your worst case scenario, most people, when I say, what's the worst case if the market crashes? 20%, 30% of our, we're going to lose 20 to 30% of our permits. We're still doing better than we were pre-pandemic, and everybody seemed to be happy, and the demand, I mean, hell, I've got builders, excuse me, I got builders telling me that it was easier to do what I was doing then because I didn't have all the hassles of labor and supply chain issues. I was making more margin on my house than I am now because all I'm doing now is trying to protect margin because everything's inefficient, and I can't build the house effect. It's harder. I'm building more, but it's harder. I'm going to go backwards. So again, even a 40% drop gets us back to a time when, whether you were in my side of the business or your side, I don't remember anybody on your side pre-pandemic saying, this market sucks. It was a good market then, right? So,
yes, thank you. Thank you for that. So my follow-up question is, looking at the first-time home buyers, we've kind of touched all around it. I do recall there was a My Board event called Sell Your Cities. And I want to say some people were targeting trying to be that place for the first-time home buyer. Like I think Lawrence did all of those new home builds with Arbor to be at a certain price point and all of that, and then the market just tick, 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 and now those are no longer first-time home buyer prices. Do you guys see anything on the horizon, whether it be, I know the container homes are also looked at as being something that could be like a first-time home buyer's thing, but then those prices tick, tick, tick. So do you guys see or know of anything on the horizon that would be like a white flag, if you will, for the first-time home buyer?
I have a friend whose grandparents passed away and gave me his house. No, I don't.
So you just gave an edict to go kill, so no.
I'll just beat on the drum that I did earlier, which is we have to change paradigms of development in our communities with our community leaders. We can't continue to create logistics jobs and be proud of ourselves and then not have apartments. I don't know if you saw apartment project in Marion County just got pulled. It's a great apartment project in a great area. Just got pulled because of neighborhood uproar about it. I will tell you, we as a development community, if you try to go into any community now and it's not a custom home subdivision of $500,000 or up, you are in for a battle and you're going to lose more times than you win. And we can't continue to have this paradigm of protecting communities' property values around large lots that nobody wants anymore, around large square footage minimums of houses that nobody wants anymore, and quarter-acre lots. I mean, I have sat through so many conversations with elected officials who are arguing a development over 1.8 units an acre versus 1.5, because that's the number they want in their head. And I challenge every one of them. Drive me through a subdivision that's 1.8 and 1.5 and tell me what the difference is, and you can't see the difference. It's all paradigms. It's all up here that we've got to protect property values by these antiquated zoning restrictions that give us sprawl, that give us expensive houses. And I'll stop with, and I'll get off the soapbox with, one of the key factors that hangs up these decision makers to protect the communities are lot widths. And it's, again, I challenge somebody to drive through a subdivision of 100, of 90, of 80, and tell me the difference, and show me the difference, and do you feel the difference? Well, we got to start talking about lots of 60, and 50, and 40, and 30 to get development because costs have gone so high. This is a key factor. We stopped talking about lots in my world on, oh, it's a third of an acre lot, it's $40,000 or whatever. We stopped talking about sizes of lots 2+ years ago. We talk about lots now on lineal feet. How much is it a lineal foot? And those costs per lineal foot now, because of development regulations, because of large lots, because we now have to put in streets that in case there's a fire and they've got to drive their 70-foot tanker truck down, we've got to have cul-de-sacs that you could turn an aircraft carrier in. I mean, there's a lot of expenses that go into a development that are public safety. Are they really, what, that one time out of a million, do we really, anyway, I'll get off that soapbox and go back to the lot widths. Lot per foot costs now are approaching $15,000 to $20,000 a foot for a lot. So if you're a planning commissioner and you got this paradigm, I want 70-foot wide lots, and somebody comes in with 50, well, I just want 70, and you don't understand, you're adding 2,000, I'll go on the low side, $1,500 a foot times 10 times 20. You've just now taken the choice for that customer who doesn't probably want to cut the 10 or 20 extra foot of that lot, grass-wise, they don't want to maintain it. Now you've taken out, how much out of their pocket? Do the math, $30,000 out of their pocket that they might have put into making that house outside exterior nicer with brick or stone, or maybe the inside they might have had something they wanted. You've taken those choices away to get us as a community feeling like we're protecting the community values by these old paradigms that, quite frankly, as an empty nester, I don't want any more than a 40-foot wide lot, but I can't find anything like that.
I have a question. I've been a building planning commissioner also, so I understand your argument. However,
and I applaud you for taking the time to do that. I really do. I'm not bashing you. I'm applauding you for taking the time to sit there and do that. That's not an easy job.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And honestly, I was going to say, did you remember your question?
Yes. I'm also a retired architect too. And I retired before a motor company, so I've got a motor background as well. So I get into automation cycles in my brain, and 3D printing has taken an evolution. And part of affordable housing, they started with Lennar. It's on a prototype project right now. I think it's here, it's in a different stage, but they're doing 3D concrete prints of these homes where a concrete machine pulls up, put it on the site, and it can literally crank out 3-4 houses a day. All the walls, everything's done, and you just come in, you put the windows in, and literally cuts down production time, cost, and labor. So I was just wondering, is that something like Maggie is interested in doing, or do they have information further on that?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of evolutions in construction that have occurred. You're on the cutting edge, right? But there's been other things, and there continue to be other things that could make building more efficient and effective. I'm going to look at every one of you and say, we're all part of the problem. Because if you remember, 20 years ago, building a panelized house where you didn't even get to the level of what we were talking about, where you just had panels come out because it was done more efficiently and effectively in a controlled environment, they just popped them up and put them together. That was heresy, right? I mean, that's a bad house, that's a cheap house, I don't want that. So I think we're ready as an industry to start talking through that. It's going to be what the market accepts, and are you going to buy that Lennar house? Are you going to be that first person to take that step, and then is the rest of the market going to build? Because I think we have a market.
Commercial, like with the warehouses that we're building now, all of that stuff is still on.
Exactly. So I think we're getting there, right? It's just going to be that market acceptance.
Yeah, no, and I would say I'm loving this conversation. If we can maybe save it for the networking time, just so that we can get through our questions.
She's got questions.
And I got videos. So, but no, I think that's huge. And exactly what you talked about, it is a mindset thing, because when I was in new construction, I sold against those houses that were put up very quickly. And ours
Cookie
took the
cutter
labor. Yeah,
box,
yeah.
I get it.
But it really, at the end of the day, does it protect you from the outside elements? Does it keep your family safe? Those are the basic questions we really need to be answering. So, with that, did you guys get something?
I just had one thing to kind of piggyback off of Steve. So Steve had a couple of really great points. So one thing to the development that just got pulled, that was a good project in a good area. They don't just let that cost that they've already sunk into that project go away, right? I mean, that gets capitalized into whatever comes next, right? So there's an added cost already on whatever's coming next. The second thing that I love what Steve said is the product choices and the product types that we really need to see being built in communities. We do a really good job of building one type of product for the most part. Justin brought up our community preference survey that we did in 2018, and it did show that there's much more of a balance in the marketplace of preference type of a single-family detached home comparatively to some kind of an attached product that's more dense or walkable, right? In preferences, it's more balanced. In reality, what exists on the ground, it's vastly different. It vastly weighs towards the detached product, the large lot. There's much more to that, right? Especially the places where the actual attached product exists. So there's some communities that have a lot more of it than others. The preferences there are higher. When people get to see it, they interact with it, their kids move into it, or they downsize into it, and they can walk to coffee shops and pubs and whatnot and still be part of the community. The preference for it is much higher. You guys are getting a little bit of a sneak peek as we just did a re-up of that survey for 2022. And that preference shifted even more towards the attached walkable product, right? We actually thought it would go the other way. We thought like people would want houses out in the middle of nowhere with 3 acres around them just to get away. People want green space, people want parks, people want places, but I think when we shut down the ability to walk to a place to pick up your lunch and to walk back, really stuck with people. You also see it downsizing the entry into the marketplace, the small lot sizes, the connected to places and things to do. We actually saw that bump up way higher than kind of what we thought it would. So there's even more of that preference out there as generations churn.
It's a new school approach to economic development.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Well, we are on for our third video.
And somewhere it might be.
And Justin, one of you actually gave some foreshadowing. You didn't even realize it. Was it Justin?
So the forecast outlook is the following. Regarding the unit sales, so your clients are not concerned with unit sales. They are thinking about home prices. But you as a realtors who need to conduct business, you do care about unit sales. So the unit sales compared to 1 year before, it is already coming in a little lighter compared to the year before. Red line beyond is the forecast. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but my best guess is that we may actually see a decline of about 15% by the third and fourth quarter of 1 year before. What does this mean? This means that we may be getting the unit sales activity back to pre-COVID days. We had a huge surge, now we're retreating back to pre-COVID days. Prices are still high, prices are not retreating, so prices are still up. Then by 2023 sometime, with job creation, home sales may return to positive territory. So in terms of the numbers, past 2 years have been quite exceptional. The revenue growth for the industry, 15% in 2020, 25% growth in 2021. But this year, the unit sales coming down, annual total 9%, but the price is still rising, so the revenue will be fairly neutral, no longer growing, but no longer really declining in any way, and then next year to see some slight growth. So
At the end of the day, our water talk around the cooler should be that home price, there's not going to be a crash, there's not going to be a bottom to this. As a matter of fact, it will stay and probably continue to inch up, maybe not at the rate that we've had. And I'm just going to do a quick question, and Justin, you can't answer because you and I looked this number up. So, can anybody remember what the median sales price was on the MyBoard snapshot in February of this year?
Of this year?
Yes, Mark.
247.
It's close. It was 256.
Where is that?
Well, let's let him pull it up. He's got his handy dandy app. And then we'll talk about where it is today. I guess can anybody tell me where it is today? It just came out yesterday. So yesterday's came out at 287. Yes, 287. And Justin's going to give us our number. And we're talking about, this is in months.
February was 251,
251. So yeah, Mark, close in.
The median.
Median. Yes, correct. There is a difference. But when you're looking at that scale is still relative. So you're talking about a jump in that median price point. So the center is off, if you will, and off and running, really. So when you're talking to your clients, just please don't let them lose this opportunity to get into real estate, because as the rates increase, as the price points either stay the same or tick up a bit, that's just making the door close and close. And then if you have institutional investors that are looking to also have a piece of that pie, then you're even in more of a combat situation. And who doesn't, okay, that's not gonna sound right. So who doesn't care about how much the interest rates are? Cash buyers. So you have to keep that in mind as well, because for them, this is gonna look like Scooby snacks out here. And our clients are gonna be trying to get their fair share, and it's up to us to help them get that. So with that last piece, this is where, you kind of hit on it, Steve, earlier as well, but what is the long-term impact of institutional investing, and what role will builders play in this? Because we are seeing some new initiatives and some new takes on things. And also, temperature check. Am I the only one that's on fire in here? I just got to check. Okay.
You are on fire. Figuratively speaking.
So, okay, all right. So, guys, go ahead and answer the question.
Yeah, so this is something I've been thinking about for a while now. We've been digging into a little bit of the data, but the question was kind of towards the long term. I'm going to cheat a little bit and answer the question I want to answer. But the question that I've been trying to answer is kind of what has been the impact so far of the institutional investors, right? And so we went back and we looked through hundreds of thousands of sales to disclosure data fields for the state of Indiana. Has a sales disclosure database, and you can download them if you want to. If you want to keep your mind right, don't, because you'll hate yourself. But and so I pulled five years worth, so we went back to 2017, and tried to track kind of the big boys in the field, and then also kind of looked at the general usage, the change in the usage of the LLC as a buying entity, right? We got really hard because the early year data, 2017, 18, 19 was really bad. We just, for whatever reason, weren't doing a good job of data management as a state. Shocker. So here's the general trend, right? Is that the institutional investors have been here in the marketplace for a while, right? It's not anything new. You saw them in 17, you saw them in 18, you saw them in 19, 20. Everybody generally in 20 kind of took a little bit of a pause. It was a weird, you see a dip. 21 was above normal. Let's just say that. It was above. It was a very active year, both on the institutional investors and just the general LLC entity as a buying. Even accounting for the crappy data, the blanks, is still higher than what you would try to compute it as, right? But if you think about 2021, that was really a rocket year. Interest rates were super low, a lot of cash floating around in the economy. So the increase in the LLC entity as a buyer, makes sense, right? I mean, if you have some cash, if you have some extra change in your pocket, interest rates are low, it probably makes sense to snatch up a couple extra properties, right? The institutional investors definitely were playing ball in 2021. The interesting thing too is we track the median sales price of their properties that they bought from what would essentially be the market, but may not be on the market. You see the median price continue to kick up year over year as well, right? And it's a little bit of chicken and egg, like how much are they contributing to that rise or how much are they reacting or both, right? So it's kind of chasing the market a bit. The interesting thing for me, all that blabbering to say, the real interesting how much of kind of an aberration or reality 21 was. And right now it's just a little too soon to really know. But as Steve said, 200 billion, which I don't think is a ridiculous number. I think that's probably fair, especially with rates doing what they are. I think you're going to see them continue to be active in the marketplace. What that does long term, I think it certainly makes the entry into the market for buyers, challenging, because they are buying. The institutional investors largely are in the 200 to 400 range, and that's where kind of the bulk of the marketplace sits, right? It's going to make it tough for people to get into the door. It's going to make it tough for people to start accruing the equity and the wealth. Beyond that, it's it makes me a little bit worried for just the model and what the model does and how it shifts consumers' attention, right?
You went to your happy place. It's concerning me.
Yeah, I did.
Speak open.
I just don't think it's going to, I don't, somebody said to me that they thought that we were kind of, at the tail end of it, and I think we're just I think we're at the beginning of it. I think what we're seeing is the beginning of something, not the end of it, not the middle of it, we're at the beginning. So I think it's going to make your jobs a bit more challenging, because you're going to have to be able to navigate that, be able to put together the best offers, be able to educate your clients. And that's where I think you add the most value to clients and consumers as well, because you're going to be their advocates, helping them through the process to think about, to strategize, to know how to write the offer, to know how to be able to negotiate. And I think it's something that you need to sell to your people, to your clients, right? So I'll put my way and pass it on. It's tough. It's hard.
I know.
I think it ain't
rude to
with
whistle.
something, in the ballpark of that. So it's not. Yeah. It's
Okay.
fine.
So the question of how does it impact the market is all right. I would agree with Brad. I think long term it's not good. The silver lining is I thought the numbers would actually be a little bit higher of investor purchases in the market. I think we run about 20%. The challenge is though the inventory issue, right? So to Brad's point about the investors being in the market for a while, like there is a certain investor, I won't say who it is, that got into the market back in like 2011, 2012. They are slowly starting to release some of that inventory back into the market. And so we got to look at it from their perspective. They have I'm going to call it a seasoning period or maturation period for their investors. 10-year, some are now 20 and 30-year fund cycles. So the question we have to ask ourselves is if a house is sold in the market today to an investor, what is the likelihood it comes back on the market while I'm still selling real estate? I hope I'm not doing it in 30 years. I hope I'm not doing it in 20 years. It's highly unlikely, right? So the question then becomes, does anything that's happening today fix the inventory issue that we're facing? I lean towards no, right? If those homes aren't going to come back on the market, inventory is going to stay suppressed for the foreseeable future, which drives values up. Real estate simple supply and demand. So I'm not overly excited about the role that they're playing. However, if I'm an agent and I have an investor that calls me up and says, I want you to represent me in the marketplace, absolutely I would do it. I don't blame any agent for anything. I think it's an opportunity in the marketplace. And again, the concern is inventory, and then back to I think I made this comment at the very beginning, the wealth of money, right? We know that the average net worth of a homeowner is 40 times greater than that of a renter, and Americans have 70% of their net worth tied up in the equity of their real estate. If that goes away, what happens long term in terms of generational wealth and the divide, as Jason talked about, we've talked about the divide of the have and have-nots, gets wider and wider, and that's a little bit concerning. So we just need to reflect inwardly on where we're positioned in the marketplace.
I've talked about what I see happen short term in the marketplace here in that regard, right, with the investor money, because those rent to buys are all investor money. It's Lennar going in partnership with some LLC with their money and deploying their capital, right? I'm going to take a little bit of a contrarian point or perspective, just because I think there's another side that we're not talking about. And I'm not speculating that this is right or it's going to happen. It just, there's headwind there that I don't think we give enough credence to when we talk about investor money, because it's so easy right now. But really, there's two things I think. One is regional. Most of that success right now in that world is not in the Midwest. It's in places that have already had such big gaps in home prices between affordability and the cost of a home, the coast, South, Florida. That's where a lot of that capital, in Arizona, that's where a lot of that capital is being deployed. And are we as a culture in the Midwest that is a little bit, when we aren't riding the highs and lows of those markets, we're a little bit more conservative. Are we going to embrace that to the level that $2 billion, some percentage of that whatever that number is that I just heard nationally is $200 billion, maybe it's $50 billion, who knows what it is, but are we going to get most of that, or is that most of that going to go to other places? So that's the one point. Regionally, I think we've got to just kind of keep it in mind. We don't follow national trends. I'm not sure we're going to follow that national trend. We may. So you can see me later and tell me I was wrong in 10 years, right? The other piece of the puzzle is that what's attracting that money right now? And it's those charts we've seen of property values doing this. Well, we all are agreeing that property values aren't going to go like this, but they're going to maybe probably do this. Because all of a sudden, because that money's fickle, we've seen it all, right? I mean, that Wall Street's fickle with their money. When that curve goes like this, does that money, I was waiting to deploy that cash. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to go back to tech stocks. I mean, remember tech stocks were,
Yes.
right? I mean, so could we be a tech stock kind of thing? So just think about it from that perspective.
We just add a couple things to what Steve said. One, the institutional buyer is a kind of a natural conclusion to what we've been doing the last 10 or 12 years, right? I mean, we came out of the crash, we underbuilt for 10 years, more than 10 years, right? Housing has basically become a scarcity on the marketplace, and where the scarcity is, that's where the margins are. The other thing that happened too is when we shut down and we had to work from home, a lot of the office, Class A office and the office portion of whatever the REITs had in the office space, they basically replaced it out with housing, right? So I mean, some of this is kind of a natural conclusion to our inactivity to be able to build houses for what people want and what people demand, right? So again, some of that falls back on us and just the inability to get through the zoning and the construction and just all the other headwinds that we've had going on, right? I had a really good second point too. Yeah, it was gonna be like you were gonna yeah.
Greg, I got a question for you based on kind of what we're talking about here, since World War II, the idea of being a home ownership and where we're going. I mean, and see what you're talking about, and you're right, the millennial looking, and I've had conversations with, kids coming out of college going, why would I want to buy a house? I want to rent. It's a great point on the downsizing and taking that money you earned out of your house now, and why would I want to reinvest it in something higher? I mean, there's going to be a push, and so, but to do where we've been to going to where we are, it's a thought change across the country. Brian, are you seeing anything legislatively outside of the HOAs and local towns and officials and so on that would want to thwart the idea of cannibalizing our housing market to investors, which are going to put these young people out of the ability to buy that house? And is there also a tipping point? I mean, as an individual investor, a mom and pop investor, we always had, we need this much margin to buy a house. And the institutional investors don't need nearly that. Is there a point where things in the economy change that this is no longer good for them, or that housing prices drop, that they need to start dumping into? I mean, is there something out there we're not talking about now?
So those are great questions, and those are all things that we've been grappling with. So the first part of that question was the legislation, yeah. So there's a lot of want to do something, but carrot and stick wise, it's hard to figure out what that is. There's only so many levers that you can really pull on it. You can be punitive or you can try to incentivize. I think the incentivized side maybe has a little bit more sway, as marginal as it may be. I think that there might be some things that we can do to possibly open up homes to first-time buyers while still giving the consumer a choice. I think the punitive side becomes a little bit more challenging. I think that's where HOAs are starting to figure out what they can do, but even that's really hard, right? It's really tricky.
Can I interrupt there? Just that is real. That's a great question. I've been in conversations. The first rent to build or build to rent project was in Greenfield, and you don't need special zoning. I mean, it's a single family house, right? So you don't need special zoning. The first one that was as it was being built, word got out to the planning commission, council, that it was a rent to build. The immediate reaction was a piece of legislation at that jurisdictional level to ban all rent-to-build development. Can't do it, right? I mean, but I think that your question is very astute in that there is going to be these overreactions that are occurring in the marketplace. I don't know how those, I mean, I'll tell you, I get interest out of policy. I'd love to see that happen. I'd love to see the lawsuit, right? I mean, I'd love to be part of it as an industry group, just to see what the outcome would be, right? I mean, where are we going to fall as a community in that?
And then on the tipping point side, we're so undersupplied as well on rental units. If you look at the increase in rents throughout the country, but also here in the Indy region too. I think until you see that start to kind of normalize a little bit and to settle or even start to decrease, and I think the margins are going to be there for, especially institutional investors. We can diversify a portfolio across multi-jurisdictions. The only other thing that's probably not a popular thing to do because where you draw your line is pretty rough, is changing tax rates for non-owner occupied. And I don't know who's got the appetite for that, but I mean that's one of the things that would change. That would change their model, right?
And Brett, what do you mean by that? What would that do? Would that be 2% property tax rates?
Well, they're already at 2 for non-owner occupied.
I mean, you talking about raising it?
Yeah, what do we go to?
But what's funny, so I thought that's where you could go. What's funny, to that end, one of the flips unintended consequences of property tax caps that we didn't expect as a building group was when we went to 1%, 2%, 3%, prior to building a new home now is now last on the list of a plan commission where it used to be first on the list when the taxes were equal, so I'm not so sure it doesn't in some level, again, my members will tell you, I'd love to go in with a multifamily project because I got a better chance when we start talking about the impact, the financial impacts of a project on a community than I do on a single family home. So I wonder if it would be this perverse, we want those rentals because now we get 3% on it or whatever. That would be interesting to see what
if the rents work out, we still do it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, and I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just trying to think
exactly.
What can you possibly do? And there's, my mind only comes to a few levers that you have, right? And then to Steve's point, do you get the unintended consequences of oops?
I didn't see that happen.
Yeah, now we're getting more money as a municipality than we ever would have.
In 08, go back to 08, think about the amount of people, unintended consequences, the amount of people that were able to keep their house by renting it out. So if the HOAs put in restrictions, maybe just done more harm than good. It's a very complex issue.
As well as you pull the string and 5 fall out, you got to figure out which one you address next, right?
All right, guys, we have time for one more question. So does anybody, yes?
So we've been talking about what is, what's maybe, what's coming, and I like to really focus on some solutions for now because we can't control anything out there other than the foundation here. So I'm curious, I just had this happen today. Millennials getting ready to buy, we've been talking about it. I actually had 4 sets today on the phone. Parents and investors got involved. 3 out of the 4. I think you ought to wait till the crash. You ought to wait till the crash. So for a solution for now, what do you guys suggest? How can we address, re-educate, and millennials, I'm experiencing
think there's several things that we have to do to prep ourselves. Going back to the video of Lawrence Human, like as we look at the future of the market and fewer units being sold, we have to make sure that we've insulated ourselves financially from those markets, right? So just continue to put pressure on your P&L first and foremost. Like every dollar out, are we getting the return that we should, or are we not? We've been living through some really great times, so it's easy to just continue to let money flow out. In terms of the education piece, as I say this, I'm chatting with myself as much as I'm talking with you. Have we actually slowed down in the business to make sure that we have the systems and processes in place to have the effective conversations we need to have? Like, I don't pick up the phone like I should to call everybody in my database to make sure that I'm having that conversation. Am I, for a first-time home buyer, am I saying, is there anybody else that's coming along that could be making a decision? If they're bringing a parent, educate the parent. Go with some factual information. Like, if Dave Ramsey is saying buy a house, it's probably okay to buy a house, right? Like, he is pretty conservative. So I think we just have to go back to our business practices and make sure that we're hitting, it's not a 33 touch anymore. Like, are we hitting them once a week? Are we bringing economic conversations of value to them? Are we giving them factual information that's leading them down the path of self-discovery? And then making sure that we're having conversations with everybody that's a decision maker in the process to get everybody on the same page. Does that kind of answer it?
And Amy, I want to piggyback on that a little bit because, you know, everybody says when the market crashes. Well, the only way you know the market crashed is it's already happened.
Yeah.
So you miss it. So you come back when it's on the uptick back. So maybe talking to them about, you know, the fact that you never know it's the bottom until it starts to come back up. So what are you waiting on? Also, if you look at how much home prices have increased, they haven't really gone down that much. You know, if they're going to go down any, they're probably going to stay steady. So do you sit on the sidelines and watch it continually creep up and, you know, just stay steady? Or do you get in now and then accrue that as equity?
And that's where my come from is, and I'm excited that everybody's hearing all this, as you guys are talking about, because I think as an industry, we need to all start sticking together
Yes.
and saying the same
Yes.
thing
Yeah.
over and
100%.
over, and really, picking up thumbs, really talking at the water cooler.
Yeah, being the leader of the
It's going to
conversations.
be up to us to make this happen, not necessarily legislation for
Yeah.
this moment. I
And,
guess.
and this is a relationship-driven business, right? So I think to that point, Michelle, as you were talking, I think the question that I would ask that first-time home buyer is, would you rather be in control of your monthly payment or not? Right? Like, we've seen other parts of the country, Miami is a perfect example, not that we're going there, but 100% rent increase year over year. Like, our long-term rental that we have here, we're taking about a 25% rent increase. Like, would you rather be in control of that, or would you rather be paying the landlord?
Well, we live in our payment, not the sales price, so we got to
Exactly.
take
Yes.
that as well.
I think we got to this at the beginning, but kind of you getting back to controlling what the actual story is, right? You know, because you hear it all in the news, you can read anything you want to find. But we had forecasted for 21, or for 22, single-digit growth, year over year. We didn't really think by the end of the year we would be double-digit. And so last month was 12.5% increase. Inflation's 8.5%, so there's 4%. You know what I mean? So not far off, but we're not quite where I thought we would be just yet. And here's the other thing: even if we have a 5%, correction, comparative to where we were pre-pandemic, if you chart out what a normal line would be and then where we are, even if you correct for that, you're still above what you would have normally been, right? The other part of that too is, for better or worse, whatever you may feel about it, the institutional investors have essentially put a floor underneath the marketplace too, right? If your buyers aren't going to buy it, then they're going to buy it.
And that comes back to Mark's question earlier about the institutional investors. As a mom and pop investor, we look at it from a cash flow perspective, right? Institutional investors do to a certain degree. They're more concentrated or concerned about the long game, which is appreciation. So they can ride out the dips in terms of monthly cash flow. I don't know where I'm going with that, but as you
were on it. 9 years is the average real estate cycle. So if you can hold it for 9 years, so maybe another question to ask your buyers is, how long do you plan to be in this home? And then
that was the greatest recovery in the housing market, was 8 years,
Yes.
right? That was a great recession. So 8 years, if you can hold it, you're good.
So guys, she'll be the last question, only because we need to get Steve's commentary in, and then we will have a chance to talk to everybody one-on-one, because I want to get y'all.
If I can add two quick things, the one tool I always use, is to talk to the buyers, is to pull out the 30-year historic average on interest rates, because we have been in a low interest rate for more than most of these agents have been in the room probably. I mean, Justin's probably going to be that old, but we have not seen that. Buyers have not seen that 6, 7, 8, 9 in where we're headed. Right. I mean, if we can get it in their head that today is still a great day to buy a house, and where we're headed, because as we were discussing yesterday, somebody was discussing, the only way we were talking about, the only way to bring in inflation and bring things down is rates are going to continue.
Yeah.
And how long is even today if that house falls back in price, how long is it going to take to get that payment back for that same house? 3, 4, 5 years, how long is it?
That's the conversation I have, is just keep saving money then, because it's gonna be more expensive next year, and you're gonna need more next year, and then,
But to ease.
I know it's kind of required.
It's our responsibility to be the educators.
Yes.
And a lot of us, who've been in the business for a while, talk to our friends. I can tell you, I had this conversation at dinner last night at 4-day ready. From people, my friends saying, when's it gonna crash? Is it gonna crash? What's gonna happen? Should I sell now? It's our responsibility to continue to talk to those people and remind them that it's like you said, we'll know if it crashes, if it starts going back up.
Yes, exactly.
So, but once, I think as we educate the parents of the millennials, we're not gonna hear that as much anymore.
I agree.
Just my 2 cents.
I agree, and that's the reason we did it today. So first of all, thank you guys. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve.
I just, because I have the microphone, I guess I have to finish and
Yes.
answer the question, which is, I think it's just PR, right? I think as an industry group, controlling that message. So as an industry group, we wrote a state of the industry letter where we talk about this and gave it to all of our members. So our members can hand it to a customer and say, this isn't me, this is what's going on in the marketplace. We do a press release every month on the permits. I try to get messages in there. I just was interviewed last week by the NBC Nightly News, the national news, about a story on investor, and I tried to spin it positively, and so I think it's just us talking as industry groups. I'm sure my board is doing lots of, in your newsletters that you're getting, and lots of positive things and information we can use. So I think that's all we can really try to do. To make us try to have an impact.
Awesome. I'm going to sum it up with actually Justin just whispered in my ear something I thought was fabulous. Just think about the conversation that we've had in here today and the thoughts and the confusion and the feelings and whatever you've got going on. If we're feeling that way and we're the experts in our market, what are our clients feeling? So that's where you come alongside, kind of like what Kim said, and you start to fill that void with proper, accurate information. So thank you guys. I would like to bring our sponsors up, if you guys wouldn't mind coming to the front, please. Thank you. Is it still on?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you. So our first sponsor that we're bringing up is Jeff Walls. He's with Bailey and Wood Financial. I'll let you come on up, Jeff.
Well, I actually realized I know a whole lot more people in the room today than I expected. So, just real quick, some of you have already heard this. We're a completely local mortgage company, starting with me all the way through underwriting, funding, everything. Can I tell them what's going to happen?
Oh, yeah, you can.
So, we're actually going to bring an underwriter into you guys' office on July 12th. To talk to you guys. It's probably going to be one of the few times, maybe the one time in your life, you guys will ever actually get to talk to an underwriter and ask questions. So
weapons will be checked at the door.
Yeah. No, it's the head underwriter for our company. She does an amazing job at working through problems and getting deals done. I think we probably close 20 to 30 deals a year that come from other lenders that literally the lender just gives up on the deal. And we figure out a way to make that deal happen. It won't happen every time. But there's a lot of deals that'll happen because we got a chance to look at it. And what I'd love to happen is if you stop sending them to other people and come to me first, you won't have those problems.
All right, I love it. And he's got a table set up out here, so please feel free to stop by and chime up.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, Don is with America's Preferred Home Warranty.
All right, just wanted to, I guess, first say thanks to Brad, Justin, and Steve. You all did a great job. The info was amazing. Thanks to the Keller Williams team for giving us the chance to come here and be a part of this. Thanks for your guys' business and your partnership's amazing. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Wow, that was really good. And I'm not sure, has anybody seen Jeff Crane? Jeff? All right, well, okay, I just had to check out there. So with that being said, we do have cocktails and or beer and wine out in the lobby area. You should have received one green ticket. That is for your beverage, your complimentary beverage. Anything after that, you get to pay for with all your cash, you rich people. So
Don has a ticket.
Oh, Don has the tickets, so he has the tickets.
Yeah.
And thank you guys, and remember